Welcome to The Cloakroom with Peter Roskam. Former Congressman Peter Roskam leads Baker Hostetler's federal policy team. Through interviews with leading members of Congress, Peter provides an insightful first-hand view into the latest policy and political debates on Capitol Hill. In today's episode of The Cloakroom with Peter Roskam, Peter interviews Congressman Tom Cole, a Republican from Oklahoma. Cole is the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. Peter and Cole discuss the challenges of keeping the federal government funded in a highly charged partisan environment and only months before the midterm congressional elections. Let's listen in to The Cloakroom with Peter Roskam.
Chairman Tom Cole, I'm delighted to be in your hideaway here in the Capitol. It's a very cool space. It does smell like this is the source of the tobacco skiff, as I'm told it's called. The cigar skiff, where cigar smokers will gather under your warm embrace and your hospitality.
Happy to have them.
You and I have known each other about 20 years.
Yeah.
And I remember when you came in and campaigned for me in 2006, when I first came to Congress. You had been in Congress 2 terms before that and were active and political. But your origin story goes way back. And I want to touch on that and then get some insight from you in this conversation, Tom, about how you've approached governing and how is it that you've been successful and influential, because everybody knows you are a person of consequence, and when you say things, it is significant, and you're able to move legislation, and that's an incredible accomplishment. But your origin story goes way back. You grew up in a political family.
Correct.
You grew up in a military family.
Correct.
Your mom was a state rep and an active member of the Chickasaw Nation.
I'm a state senator as well and a mayor.
Okay. So what was it that when you were a young kid growing up in and around the influence of your folks and in this environment where you said, you know what, I think I want to go in this direction? Or did you at that point?
Well, I did not. I had a PhD in British history. I was going to be a college history professor. But while I was in the pursuit of that, my mother had become a political activist. She grew up in a Democratic family in a Democratic state. But as my dad was military, she moved around. She said, gosh, every place that there's 2 parties, government seems a lot better and a lot more transparent. And I just think, naturally interested in politics. Her grandfather had been the last elected treasurer of the Chickasaw Nation before the Dawes Commission in Oklahoma statehood. His father had been a elected Supreme Court clerk, tribal Supreme Court clerk. So there's a lot of tradition of this. And so she got active. My dad retired out in '60. She got actively involved in local politics, and she was kind of a worker bee, precinct chairman, then a county officer, then the state committee woman. She did all that sort of stuff. And they finally talked her into running for the state legislature in an area that was very heavily Democrat. And her first race was in '76. I was in graduate school. I lived immediately adjacent to her district, which sort of went around Norman and up into our hometown of Moore. I was in Norman and OU. And I did a couple things in the campaign, put out some signs, but it's like, me knock doors, me do this. And I will tell you, the worst place on the planet to be is your mother's watch party the night you lose. Oh. Very close, and you haven't done very much. And so we used to have our family, my wife and I would have Sunday dinner with my parents because they had a washing machine, and magically my dad would come out and fill up the car, kind of help the kid along a little bit. And a few weeks after the election, we were talking over dinner, and I said, I think I understand why you lost. And she says, yeah, really, kid? Why? And I said, because I think you tried to be the candidate and the campaign manager both, which is a normal first-time candidate mistake, particularly when you're focused on a local race. And I said, if you ever do this again, I'll learn how to run a campaign. I think you'd win. You just didn't have enough time to reach out and interact with voters, because she was supremely good at working with people. And so, February of '78 rolls around. I'm in London on a Fulbright fellowship, and my mother gets in touch with me and goes, when are you coming home? I'm running.
Wow.
And, she knew I was coming back in June. I was teaching European history courses at the University of Oklahoma. And so I came back, went to a little state party sponsored campaign manager school for 2 days, and met with my academic advisors and told them, look, I'm going to teach the classes because I need the money, but I'm not going to do anything else on my dissertation from now to November. And they were great about it. They said, fine, you're our best student. Okay. And so I put together a campaign and she won that time. And not because I was great, but because she got to be a full-time candidate, which she excelled at. And I fell in love with it. I liked doing it. And when I was a kid in high school and college, I was a pretty decent football player, D3, not serious football. And but I like team sports, and that's what politics really is. It's a team. It's an adult team sport.
What was your next step after that? So
After that, well, after she wins her campaign, just stay active, and I start running races, little school board races or a special county commissioner race, and I got a reputation as being pretty good. And finally, one of my clients, because I was at a critical point in dissertation, and I said, I really don't have time. Guy was running a county commissioner race, and he was his son and I had played football together, and he goes, "Well, I'll pay you." And I said, "You can make money doing this?"
wow.
And it's like $100 a week or something like that. I said, "Well, yeah, I'll do that." And he won, and I got a call from the state party chairman going into the 1980 campaign. And he said, will you take a year out of academic life and come and be the executive director of the state party? And I thought, it paid a lot better than being a graduate student. And I thought, well, that's fun. And Don Nichols was running for the Senate. He and my mom had become good friends in the state legislature. Ronald Reagan's running, my kind of boy.
Oh, yeah.
And, we have a great election cycle and we win. Frankly, I just, there was always another political job coming. I went and worked as a deputy campaign manager in a long shot governor's race in '82. We won the nomination, but we got creamed in the general. Then immediately after that, Congressman Mickey Edwards, who became the fourth ranking leader in the Republican Party, it was the only Republican congressman in Oklahoma at the time, called and they'd redistricted. He had a new area and he said, I needed a field rep that's got a political bent. Would you come do that? So I did that, became his district director, ran the Reagan campaign in Oklahoma, which is like being a jockey on Secretariat. I mean, it ain't the jockey, it's the horse. And I had a pretty damn good horse. And then after that, become state chairman in Oklahoma. And so sort of rose up through the partisan ranks that way. I'd done 2 terms, very successful. We had the most, it's actually when I met Mitch Daniels, because he was White House political director after the '86 race. We won, Nichols got reelected, which was a big deal because we'd lost the Senate that year. But as a freshman senator, he had actually expanded his deal. We picked up a governor's race for the first time in 20 years. We picked up a second congressional seat with Jim Inhofe, one state. So we had the most successful election in America if you were a Republican in '86. Mitch actually called me. I walked in the office the morning after the '86 election, and he goes, my secretary says, hey, the White House political director just called here for you. And I get on the phone, and Daniels is on the other end of the line. He goes, Chairman, I don't know what the hell you did, but I got to put the President of the United States in front of a press conference, and we don't have very many good things to talk about except Oklahoma. Could you send everything up for talking points? So we did that. But after I did that, I did another 2 years as state chair, and then my mom decided to retire. She later came back, but to retire from the state Senate in Oklahoma. My dad had Alzheimer's, and my grandmother was very ill and living with them, and it was just too much. And so I won her state Senate. At that time, it was the most expensive state Senate race in Oklahoma history because all the Democrats all over the state hated me for having been a pretty successful Republican chairman. A lot of these guys are now really good friends of mine.
Of course they are.
but I won that seat. Started out, and when I'd been state chairman, I'd become very good friends with Spencer Abraham, later United States Senator from
Right.
Michigan, later cabinet secretary. Spence and I were the two youngest state chairmen in America. And so everybody else was older than us. So, we became good buddies. And after that election, or after 90, Guy Vanderjack, who was, longest serving
Yeah.
chairman of the NRCC in history, needed to clean the place up, and they hadn't had any good elections in a while. So he brought Spencer over as what was called co-chairman. And he called me and said, you need to come up to DC. I said, I'm in the state Senate. I had a political firm that my
Yeah.
political director and finance director and I had set up, still exists. I still own a piece of it. Made us all a lot of money over the years. But I said, I've got my new company. Well, 30 days later, I was in DC
As the
running
executive
as the
director.
ED of the NRCC. So came up that way, and then went back to Oklahoma for the 94 cycle. We won everything. J.C. Watts was one of our clients. Frank Lucas was one of our clients. Steve Largent, Tom Coburn.
These are big names.
Yeah,
These are,
Frank Keating
Yeah.
was the governor.
yeah.
I was his principal political guy. So, again, I going along doing that, became Secretary of State, which is an appointed position in Oklahoma, and really not heavily involved in elections. It's really, I turned it into some sort of being the consigliere for the governor. And come 19, we win the re-election. All my clients are doing good. And all of a sudden, Jim Nicholson, who had become a good friend of mine, we were on the national committee, calls me up and says, I need you to, we didn't have very good 1998, if you remember. And he said, I need you to come up here and be my chief of staff to the Republican National Committee. I said, I'm not going to do that. I did. In 2000, it's the first time in 48 years the Republican Party wins the presidency,
Yeah.
the Senate, and the House in the
Yeah.
single election. U.S. Chamber comes over. We need you to do our, become our top political guy. And I remember the guy that Steve Hart was a lobbyist and the leader of Williams and Jensen at the time. He was the one doing the recruiting. And I said, Steve, I'm going home. I've got other things to do. And he said, well, how much would it cost to buy half your time, where you spent half your time here, half your time in Oklahoma? And so I named what I thought was I said, you can't afford it. A ridiculous figure. And he said, oh, I can do that. What a dummy I was. But it was the highest six figures I'd ever been paid. So did that and thought, okay, the rest of my career is doing this, running campaigns, doing the political stuff. And my star client, really, in many ways, was J.C. Watts, who is one of the best natural politicians I ever met. Only the second African American Republican elected in the 20th century. The only other one was Senator Brooks from Massachusetts. And so, but J.C.'s rising here, becomes conference chair, his third term, beats Boehner.
Right.
But he decides after his fourth term, or in that time frame, she decided for a fifth not to run because he needed to go make money, which, by the way, he's done fabulously well.
How nice for him.
Oh, my God. He's got a 3,000 acre ranch back in Oklahoma. He kind of picks his clients, sits
Good for
on
him.
boards, done well. But I was up here on my chamber gig, and his chief called me and said, hey, boss wants to have dinner with you tonight. And he told me he wasn't going to run. I said, well, I'm going to spend the next, and he said, you need to run. So I don't want to do that. But I'm going to spend my time trying to get you to change. I actually talked to Speaker Hastert at the time, and he goes, I'd gotten to know him when I was in RCC ED. And he goes, Tom, your job is to talk JC into running again. And if you don't, then you have to run.
Oh, man.
So Karl Rove called all these guys once we couldn't get JC to run again. And I thought, well, here I am. He decided late, so it's late June of 2002. And I knew nobody else could win that seat. Only JC could have won it. First Republican to ever hold it. It was
Yeah.
registered over 60%.
When was the primary?
Democrat. The primary was in July, and
Oh, this is
so
unbelievable.
this is happening, and so it's like this
Okay,
all
this is
happening.
unbelievable.
But I'd already built all of his staff, and
Right.
all of
So
his
all the
operation.
infrastructure.
Yeah, and so I decided, well, it's only 17 weeks from now to November. I've got the apparatus in place. If it doesn't work out, I talked to the guy, Tom Donahue, who was over at the chamber running it.
Yeah.
He said, I'll keep you on half time, and if you lose, you come back here. If you win, you take a big pay cut, and you're
Right.
in Congress.
Right.
So I decided I would make the race. It was a targeted NRCC race. I won it, and stumbled here, but it was never part of a master plan. It was always just something that opened up.
The next thing.
The next thing. And yeah, so I ended up coming here. I thought I'd be here 6 to 10 years, and 24
24
years
years
later,
later.
I'm still here.
It seems a pretty consistent story. So let me ask you a couple of questions. You show up here in 2002. I'll call these the good old days. So
They were.
there. There's a bit of nostalgia about them, but there was a disposition to the House Republicans at that time, and you would have fit right in. And you had a relationship with the Speaker, a friendship, or an
Delay,
affiliation.
all those guys.
All those guys. They're your people. So you fit right in. We lose the majority in 2006. Regain it in 2010. You're in the middle of that. You're the chairman of the NRCC for part of
only
that
for
time.
the first 2 years.
Okay.
Because in 2006, as you alluded to in our previous conversation, Boehner and Blunt run against one another.
Yeah.
I'm the only deputy whip. Back then, becoming a deputy whip was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I was, in my second term, I'm the only person in our class, which was a big class, that Blunt has tapped as a deputy whip. Nobody else made it before their fourth term. And so I'm close to him, but I was also close. I knew Boehner, again, when I was doing chamber work, and a great guy. I asked to go to his committee, as a freshman. So, but I
That's
ended
a
up.
tortured position, by the way.
Yeah.
So you got a relationship with both of these guys, but you went with Blunt.
I went with Blunt, which
Boehner
a
won.
decision I've never regretted, but it really upset Boehner. So he tried to beat me in 2006. I ran for NRCC chair, and once I'd chosen Blunt, which again, all that was happening separately, he never forget. Well, he didn't forget it then. So he tried to beat me for NRCC chair. He couldn't. But come 2008, we had another difficult
You guys
year.
ultimately reconciled.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I consider him a very good friend, and but for about 2 years, I was so deep in the doghouse I couldn't get my snout out the door. But you just go back to work. You raise money for people. You work hard. You play with the team. And literally, the day before the new majority showed up, we were having a conference, and he gets up and he's going down. He's thanking Eric Cantor, and he's getting down the list of all his guys that had all played critical roles in coming back. And he said, and he gets to NRCC chair, which was Pete Sessions, good friend of mine, but we ran against one another twice. I won the first time. Second time, I withdrew pretty dramatically right on the eve of the deal. I think I was still in the race, but the speaker was the leader was openly opposed to me, and I thought, this isn't a good thing. It's
Right.
not, we're going to stay adversaries. So I stepped back from that. But anyway, Boehner gets up in 2010 at this last conference before we bring the new guys in to swear in. He said, hey, by the way, 2 years ago, they're talking to the conference. There was an NRCC race, and I got in it in a very big way. I mean, publicly endorsed me as being a leadership race. My guy won. But I got to say, nobody's done more the last 2 years to help us become a majority than Tom Cole. I chaired 2 dues drives for the NRCC along with Kevin Brady, and we were called the Dues Brothers because I was tall and he was a little bit shorter. So that sort of got me back, and I got to the Appropriations Committee where I wanted to go. And that had actually happened 2 years before that. I remember having discussions, should I if I, gave up the NRCC, uh, I wanted to be on approach, and there was no deal cut or anything like that. But I remember talking to Ken Calvert at the time, very good friends. I was ED of the NRCC when he won in '92, and we're the night before I pulled out, and he says, "Tom, I don't know if you'll win or lose tomorrow." I'm making my pitch. He'd been one of my whips the
Mhm.
first time around, and he goes, "But I do know John Boehner's going to be, the next leader. So you need to get out of this and come over to the
Figure it out.
approach committee. You and I'll travel the world. We'll do approach stuff
Right.
together." It's actually pretty good advice. Jerry Lewis, who was in my corner and helping me, was the Republican ranking member and ultimately chairman of the Appropriations Committee. He gave me the same advice. And interestingly enough, I'd watched him lose to Dick Armey and when I was over at the chamber, and he lost by 3 votes. Gingrich was openly against him, but he was reminiscing about that, and he said, "Tom, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. I did all that leadership stuff. I was right on the edge. I was nose to nose with Gingrich, and uh, when I lost, a lot of my people thought it was the end of the world. I did too." But I went over I took my job seriously at Approach, and I found I enjoyed being an appropriator.
Mm.
First, he chaired defense approach, becomes chairman of the whole deal. And so you should do the same thing. So I thought
Yeah.
about it. I did that, and sort of got on that track as the legislative end of it. Actually, the same advice I gave Kathy McMorris Rogers after she got knocked out in a conference chairs
Yeah.
race to Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
And I remember going to see her and saying, "Look, you think this is the end of the world? Let me
Right.
tell you what happened to
Right.
me. You're going to love energy and commerce being a legislator again."
Sun's gonna come up.
Yeah, and it did, and she became,
Yep.
two-term chairman of that committee.
Yeah.
Would have won a third term had she decided not to retire. But you just don't quit in the business. There's always if you get up the next day. I remember talking to my chief after we lost the NRCC race, or I withdrew, and we come back, and I said, "Well, what do you think we do now?" His name was Sean Murphy. Since sadly died of a heart attack when he was my chief, but he says, "We make friends.
Yeah.
Just make friends. That's the only
That seems
strategy
to
we
me,
have."
listening to this, Tom, that it seems to me like an inflection point, and I want to just press in on that. So as you that experience and the incredible partisan background that you had has to have had an influence on how you approach this role now as chairman of the Appropriations Committee, because I can tell you reputationally, even though you are a partisan Republican. I mean, you're a pure breed. All these campaigns, all these races, all this fundraising and sharp elbowed political activity, and yet you've got Democrats that really think highly of you and trust you and are willing to interact with you in a very, very significant way. What is it? And I was when I was talking about having this conversation with you to others, I said there's a lot of people that think Tom Cole is successful because he's nice to his counterpart, Rosa DeLauro, who's the ranking Democrat on the Appropriations Committee. And yes, he's nice to her. Yes, he treats her with respect. But there is so much more to the success of being able to put together these incredibly complicated bills in ways that you can get as much bipartisan support as possible. And I think it's uh, I think it's unusual. You just don't see that a lot. How when the different classes have come in. So in the group of 2010, the Tea Party group comes in, fire and brimstone, change the world and so forth. The 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 analog equivalent of that, the Freedom Caucus and so forth. How have you approached those groups to try and get them to yes
Well, you
on these
usually
various
know
things?
the things you can't work on together. You figure out the things you can. I mean, Rosa and I, we've been on a committee, but we hadn't gotten to know one. I became chairman of Labor H. most difficult one of the, I mean, nobody above me in seniority wanted to do it. We hadn't gotten a bill out in 5 years.
The Labor, Health, and Human Services Subcommittee.
Correct.
Completely
Largest
miserable.
domestic spending.
Super controversial.
Yeah.
It's a complete nightmare.
So I called Rose up, who had been the ranking member there for a number of years, and I said, "Why don't we have breakfast?" And we got to know one another. And I said, "We're going to have a lot more hearings than we had because I want to figure out the things you and I and our committee could work on together." And we figured it out over several meetings. Well, we both like biomedical research, so we can do that. We both liked early childhood, which is a really good investment for the country to make. And finally, we both like to do things for first generation college kids because I think that changes the whole trajectory of a family if you can get them into college. Nobody's gone before. Everybody wants their kid to go, but they don't know much about it if they've ever gone to college. I mean, that had been my experience growing up. And so we found the areas we could work together. We got to, obviously 8 times in a row, we'd always start in a different place. 4 years I was chair, 4 she was chair, but we could always get to the same place where we could vote for final passage because we knew the areas we had. I'm a pro-life Republican. We're not going to agree on abortion. We can spend our time fighting about it. I'm not trying to move you. I'm not moving from my position. We're not going to agree on the gun issues. I'm a Second Amendment, classic kind of Republican, and we're not going to agree on a lot of things. But you find the things you can work on together. You create, some success in that. I remember passing one of these bills once. I got an email from our old colleague Rahm Emanuel, who we both served with. And he said, "Boy, you and Rosa DeLauro, who would have ever believed it? Talk about the odd couple." But my mother was very good at that. I mean, she was very popular. She always served in the minority. We're a very democratic state. But she was usually ranked as one of the top legislators because she knew instinctively how to build a relationship with somebody that could be mutually successful. And it's not a matter of changing who you are. It's a matter of finding out the things you work on together and creating a situation where you both can be successful. And, passing bills is really about finding something that everybody can feel like they had some success and part in. That's one of the things we do now, as I do as chairman. I don't want to make all the decisions. I push the decision making down to my cardinals, my subcommittee chairman. I got 12 of them. They're all good. And so you make the decisions. I'll give you an allocation. You stay within the allocation. I don't care what you do. I support my chairman. So they buy into success. And politically, I will tell you, on appropriations at least, and I think it's true on most things, the lower you make the decision, the lower down the food chain, number one, the more informed it is because they're chairman of their committee. They're at every hearing. So are their counterpart, and the less political it is.
Yeah.
When you move up, so even if you get to the top 4 on approach, we're thinking politically. If it goes above our head, the guys making the decision, the speaker and all, number one, they don't usually know the subject matter. Their staff is very good, but they're not as good as my approach staff within the specific area. And it's always more political. It's about, well, I got to keep the Freedom Caucus happy, or I got to worry about the Midwest farmers or whatever. It's never what the hell the good policy is that you might even be able to work with on the other side. So again, sharing the decision making, letting the people on the other side, they got here the same way I did. They represent 800,000 people. They've got a set of interests. Frankly, most of them are not subject to a Republican challenge anyway. The world we live in now, 80 to 90% of us on each side, the main race is the primary. So they're going to be here. You might as well learn to live with them and see if there's some areas you can work on together. And
Let me ask you
find that.
Let me ask you one question before we go. Look over the horizon, 2028, not horse race stuff, but what's your view on where are these two parties going right now? And what do you think?
Well, they're far apart. They're polarized and as partisanized as I've ever seen them. When I first got here, honestly, there were lots of blue dog Democrats. We served with lots.
Right.
They're all gone.
Yeah.
I mean, Henry Cuellar's around here, my very good friend, is kind of the last. He's like a dinosaur wandering the halls because he really is a blue
Keith
dog.
Schuler, all those guys.
Yeah. And so, I watched, again, when I won in 2002, Right next door is Arkansas. 3 of the 4 House members were Democrats. Most senators were Democrats, very conservative Democrats. They're all Republican now, and it's unthinkable that a Democrat could beat any of them. When I got here, Connecticut, where Rosa was from, 5 members, 3 were Republicans. They're all gone now, and it's unthinkable a Republican is going to win there anytime soon. So the blue places in the country have gotten bluer. The red places have gotten redder, and partisan alignment. So the politics of how you pass something is very different than it was back in the early 2000s. And that transition probably was the sharpest beginning in 2010 with the rise of the Tea Party. But, I'd also argue that Obama honestly radicalized the Democratic Party. It is so much further to the left now than when you and I first got here. They basically have driven out. Remember, there used to be a huge pro-life, pro-gun. They're all gone.
Right.
So they've actually made us more conservative. Because again, I came from a state, we didn't, in the history of Oklahoma, we didn't take the state house until 2004. We didn't take the Senate until 2008. They were very narrowly divided. Today, we have 48 senators in Oklahoma. 41 of them are Republicans.
Wow.
83 of the 101 in the House. And these were people that a generation before were part of the Democratic coalition. Most of my life, there was only 1 Republican congressman from Oklahoma, occasionally 2 out of then 6, 1 senator. Now we own everything in the state. And I see that, up here, again, most of the Democrats I deal with, the majority's in play. But when I was chief of staff of the Republican National Committee, there were about 160 seats in the country that were decided within 5 points, one way or the other. Today, there's maybe 40.
Wow.
So again, you govern differently than you did then. And then on top of that, of course, right now we have very narrow majorities, and that impacts things, but it always maximizes the strength of your fringe elements. All of a sudden, 3 or 4 votes matter. That's not always the case. We passed the first Trump tax cuts in 2017, and we lost like 12 or 14 Republicans. We lost all the folks in the Northeast. New York, over SALT and things like that. Can't do that anymore.
Right.
At least not right now. So again, but political chessboard changes, but good players are good players.
That's so well said. And let's leave it there. So I have one suggestion, that if you ever have a podcast, you should call it the Cigar Skiff with Tom Cole. But for now, this is the Cloakroom with Peter Roskam, and I'm really grateful for your time today.
Peter, thank you. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Peter and Congressman Cole. If you have any questions for Peter, his full contact information is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening to Baker Hosts and the Cloakroom with Peter Roskam. Comments heard on Baker Hosts are for informational purposes and should not be construed as legal advice regarding any specific facts or circumstances. Listeners should not act upon the information provided on Baker Hosts without first consulting with the lawyer directly. The opinions expressed on Baker Hosts are those of participants appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect those of the firm. For more information about our practices and experience, please visit bakerlaw.com.